Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. I'm going to give it a minute or two to let everyone in. All right, let me give it another minute, and then we'll get started. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. First, want to start out by saying thank you all for joining us here today. My name is Jessica Lopez, and I'm the Acting Program Manager for the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program, or AHSC or ASIC. I'm joined today by my colleagues, Justin, Brianne, Ella, and our partners from the Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, and our partners from the Air Resources Board, or CARB. Before we jump into the bulk of this presentation, I do want to mention a few housekeeping items. So one, the webinar is being recorded. This will be helpful for us at the end to, make sure that we're going over the questions and answers said throughout this workshop. And this recording will also be posted to our SGC AHSC YouTube page. Secondly, this is webinar style. So there is a Q&A function. So throughout the presentation, feel free to use the Q&A function, input your questions. We'll be answering them throughout. We do ask if you put in a question to reference the specific change in your question instead of generally referring to it, because we'll be moving through the presentation. So we just want to make sure that we know what specific change you're referring to when we're answering your question. And then at the end of the presentation, we will have an open discussion kind of Q&A. So you will be able to verbally ask your questions if you'd like to at the end. So before we get started, we do have a poll. And this poll is just 3 questions to give us a sense of who is in the room with us. What is your familiarity with AHSC? And I'm going to give you all a minute or two if you could please answer that before we go ahead and get started. Give it a few more seconds. Good participation. Thank you. Great, we have about 75% complete. So a minute one, maybe it's 20 more seconds, and then I'll go ahead and close it. Okay, so we have a good mix of participants. Seems like statewide, coastal SoCal, Bay, a lot of developer presence, and then a good amount of people not familiar with AHSC. So the beginning portion will be helpful. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Thank you all. Great. So we can go to the next slide. All right. So what is AHSC? At a very high level, AHSC funds projects that combine housing, transportation, community programs with the intent of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled. What is the intent of today's workshop? So the purpose of today is to kind of give you all an overview of the program, go over changes that we've made to draft Round 9 guidelines outside of Round 8 guidelines, go over some changes that we're making to the benefits calculator, the GHG calculator, and then have an open space for questions, providing clarity, just to get general feedback on the changes proposed. This is the first of 3 workshops. Like I mentioned, we'll have workshops on Monday and Tuesday of next week in person in San Bernardino and Stockton. The presentation is the same at all 3 workshops, so there's no need to attend all 3, though we welcome you to join us in person if you're available. We also have office hours, which I will cover in the next slide. So if you go to the next slide. Oh, I forgot to mention. So the intent of this presentation is to take about an hour, and we'll have about an hour for Q&A as well. Okay, so timeline. This is a general timeline for round 9. We plan to release final round 9 guidelines in February of next year, with the notice of funding availability or NOFA in March, applications due in May, and then awards in December. Do want to also highlight, like I said, office hours are also available during this public comment period. Office hours are meant to be an additional space to hear feedback, provide clarity, and just discuss draft round 9 guidelines with staff. So that's happening tomorrow and then next Wednesday. And I'll post in the Eventbrite link to sign up for that in a bit. Maybe send that over. All right, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Justin, who's going to give us an overview of the AHSC program. Justin?
Hi, yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Justin Duwale. I am a program analyst with AHSC at SGC. So I'm going to give a broad overview of our program. So what does AHSC fund? It funds these 4 main components. The first is the affordable housing development itself, or AHD for short. This can come in the form of a loan for rental projects or a grant for homeownership projects. Projects can be mixed income or mixed use. However, our funding only goes to the income restricted units in the project. Projects must have a minimum of 20% of the total units income restricted. However, our most successful applicants are 100% affordable projects. Next, we have housing related infrastructure, or HRI for short. That this is infrastructure improvements that are required as a condition of approval. It also includes factory-built housing components for those types of projects and on-site energy storage, such as battery arrays. The next category is sustainable transportation infrastructure, or STI for short. This category includes transit, bikeways, pedestrian networks, curb ramps, bus shelters, urban greening, lighting, and more. And then finally, we fund community serving programs, or PGM for short. This category consists of programs, social services that help the surrounding community. It includes active transportation programs, transit ridership programs, workforce development, tenant legal counseling, and more. These can be provided by the developer, a public agency, or a community-based organization, and they can be either restricted to residents or open to the wider community. So this is a breakdown of our funding, where it comes from and how it works. We are funded through the statewide Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is the state's cap and trade fund. 20% of those funds go to AHSC through the year 2030. As you can see, each round we have somewhere between 650 and 800 million dollars to award. And for this round, we have 775 million to award. We have a minimum project award of 10 million and a maximum of 50 million per project. And we're proposing a $1 million minimum award for tribal projects. There's a $35 million cap for the housing components and a $15 million cap for the transportation components. So project threshold, these are some of our key project threshold requirements. This is not the exhaustive list. You can find that in the summary of key changes document. So the project must demonstrate that they have site control. The developer must have the requisite experience and capacity to carry out the proposed project. The applicant must not have active or pending litigation. The discretionary land use approvals must be provided in the application. The project must have all electric design and provide internet service to each restricted unit. There must be an existing qualifying transit or high quality transit stop within a half mile of the proposed project. The project must conform with the local sustainable community strategy for that region. The project must consist of at least one STI and one AHD and or HRI component. And for agricultural land preservation, in this round, we are removing the infill exemption there, except for tribal projects. And we will go into this change later in the presentation. We're also removing the planned transit option for rural innovation project areas, and we'll define that term later in the presentation. And the term sponsor we are introducing for rental AHD developers to better align with a MHP and other HCD programs. So our scoring criteria, our AHSC is a competitive program. Our scoring is on a 100-point scale, and projects rarely, if ever, get the full 100 points. And this is our breakdown of how we allocate points. 30 are available for GHG reduction scoring. There are 50 points in the quantitative policy scoring section and 20 in the narrative-based policy scoring. And I will now pass it to Ella to continue.
Thanks, Justin. So here at AHSC, we award projects based on highest score and then in alignment with several goals that are set by our council and our statute. So we designate 35% of our funds each round to transit-oriented developments. We designate 35% to integrated connectivity projects and 10% to rural innovation project areas. And I grouped these three together because they are all project area types. So each applicant will identify their project within one of these project area types. And then this is how we designate those funds. Excuse me. And then in addition to these, we allocate at least 50% of our funds each round to disadvantaged communities as identified by Cal EnviroScreen. And then we designate at least 50% to housing. We award at least one tribal project each round, although we are proposing a modification to this goal for round 9. And we'll go into that in a little more detail later on in the presentation. And then we award at least one project in each of our 8 geographic areas. And I'll go over these in the next slide. I do just want to quickly mention that none of these set-asides are mutually exclusive, so your project can count toward multiple goals. For example, let's say you have a transit-oriented development project that is in a disadvantaged community, and your project would count towards both of those goals. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I mentioned, we have 8 geographic areas that we divide the state into for the purposes of of that geographic goal on the previous slide. So I'll give you all a moment here just to find your county and identify which geographic region you fall under. We've got Central Coast, Coastal Southern California, Inland Southern California, North State and Sierras, Sacramento area, San Diego area, San Francisco Bay Area, and the San Joaquin Valley. And this will, again, like Jessica mentioned, be posted on our YouTube page. And these are also identified in our guidelines. So if you don't have time to find it now, no worries. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to move into a discussion of the major changes that we've made between round 8 and round 9. I do just want to preface this conversation by saying we're providing an overview of the major changes that we've made. If you would like to see all of the changes in detail, we recommend going to our website where you can look at the actual round 9 draft guidelines themselves. And then we also have a summary of changes document on that page also. Next slide. Okay, so this is our threshold requirement section. So this is the section that all projects have to meet our threshold requirements in order to qualify for the program. And so we provided more clarity here about how to demonstrate developer experience. We also clarified that projects cannot be built on agricultural land, and we updated this definition to specifically call out prime farmland, unique farmland, and farmland of statewide importance. And then the only exemption proposed in our draft round 9 guidelines to this threshold requirement is for projects that are on tribal land or land owned by tribes that also have infill documentation. And then I just want to note that after we posted round 9 draft guidelines, we have had some further conversations with our interagency partners and done some further research that is leading us to consider updating the agricultural land definition again to also include farmland of local importance and grazing land. So this would be in alignment with what is considered ag land for the purposes of environmental review under CEQA. We also removed urban greening and lighting from our threshold requirements and are giving applicants the ability to expand on their urban greening efforts in the narrative scoring section. And then we've also moved our housing element in substantial compliance section into scoring as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are the changes that we've made to our eligible projects and costs. So the first thing is that we clarified the requirements for STI improvements to on-demand transit. So more specifically, we are now requiring that that on-demand transit include a designated pickup location within the project area. We are also requiring that each project has at least one transit and one housing component. We have removed planned transit as qualifying transit for RIPA projects, so at Rural Innovation Project areas. We are still funding planned transit, but it no longer serves as qualifying transit. We have combined STI and TRA costs into one category. So these two used to be separate categories, both related to transportation, and we've gone ahead and combined them for streamlining purposes. So you can now find all of those costs under STI or Sustainable Transportation Infrastructure. We did not remove any costs in this process. We've just combined them under one category. And then we added a first-time homebuyer mortgage assistance loan program as an eligible use of affordable housing development home ownership funds. And we are still in the process of identifying the best way to align this with the Cal Home program, but it is reflected in our round 9 draft guidelines. And then we are also moving our maximum loan and grant amounts, as well as our overall award limits, to our NOFA, which is expected to release about a month after final guidelines are adopted by Council. And we do expect the award limits to stay the same as they were in round 8, excuse me. But they will no longer be found in the actual guidelines themselves. We will be moving them to the NOFA. Next slide. All right, so we're going to talk now about the changes that we made to our scoring for the program. We did some general shifting of points to our scoring categories. So the program as a whole is still scored on a 100-point scale, but we have done some shifting. So the GHG reduction section remains the same at 30 points. And then our QPS, or quantitative policy scoring section, has been reduced from 52 points to 50 points. And then our narrative section has been increased from 18 points to 20 points. And then overall, we did some just general restructuring for clarity and streamlining. We reduced it from 10 categories to 5 categories. And in that process, we did remove points for green building and for programs. So I'm going to pass it now to Brianne to go over some more details about the scoring changes.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Ella. My name is Brianne Logasa. I'm an associate planner at SGC, and I'll just jump into some of the other scoring changes. So in the STI section, we are proposing allowing applicants to double up on their local bus strategies in order to get the full points. So if you participate in previous rounds, like last round, round 8, projects had to select 2 different strategies in order to get the full 4 points. So this change would allow projects to hone in on only one strategy for the full points if they so choose. Also, in order to get points for the project area being in a jurisdiction with a pro-housing designation, those jurisdictions must also demonstrate substantial compliance of their housing element. Now, an entirely new scoring category we're proposing for this round are the priority populations points. So projects would receive 3 points if the housing is within a DAC or a disadvantaged community, and 2 points if the housing is located within a low-income community or a half-mile buffer community. Now, another idea we're considering that is not on the slide is awarding 5 points for applications where a tribal entity is either the developer for the housing or the project partner responsible for the transportation components. The terms to receive these points would be the same terms that are required for a project to be considered a tribal entity, to be considered for the tribal entity goal or the set aside. And next slide, please. All right, so this first one is pretty straightforward. First-time homebuyer mortgage assistance loans is now an eligible activity for anti-displacement points. And on the local workforce side, we increased the points available in this category from 3 to 4 points and introduced a tiered structure in compliance with AB 680. We are also proposing to delete the program scoring category, although programs will still be an eligible expense for AHSC overall. Lastly, for this slide, we added 2 points to the climate adaptation and community resilience section. With that, next slide. Thanks. Unrelated to scoring, there are a few other changes we proposed in these draft guidelines. For the negative points policy, we clarify that negative points can be assessed on all responsible parties of an AHSC project. And as I mentioned with the workforce section, we also added the AB 680 workforce standards that all projects must comply with unless they qualify for a project level exemption. And back in September, HCD announced that their programs would no longer require the limited waiver of sovereign immunity, so we've removed it in these draft guidelines. Now, one change we're proposing to make for final guidelines that are not in the draft is modifying the tribal entity goal from having a 1 project target to a $50 million target, which is the equivalent to the maximum amount that one project could request. So what I mean by that is, say, should 2 tribal projects apply for $25 million each, for example, both those projects could be included to meet that tribal entity goal, whereas in the past, only 1 project could meet the tribal entity goal. And last point here, we clarified demand responsiveness requirements for the on-demand transit service. Next slide. In rounding out guidelines changes, we added to draft guidelines an allowable deduction to the net density calculation for non-developable areas. And we also updated the definition of peak period to align with TCAC scoring. And we removed on-demand transit service as an option for qualifying transit. I said that a little fast, so I'll pause on this slide for a moment. All right, we can go on to the next slide. All right, with the release of final guidelines in February, we also plan to release updated supplemental materials. So for the narrative prompts and rubric, we intend to incorporate green building and lighting with minimal changes to the other sections. We've received feedback last round on the project area mapping guidance, so we will be updating that. And we'll also make updates to the commitment template letter that's used to get the anti-displacement points. Lastly, CARB will update the GHG benefits calculator tool. And speaking of which, I'll now pass it over to my colleague at CARB, Julia Branco, to discuss the draft changes to the GHG calculator.
Thanks, Brianne. Hi, everyone. I'm Julia Branco. I'm an air pollution specialist at the California Air Resources Board. Today, I'll be reviewing the changes that we made to the AHSC benefits calculator tool. Next slide, please. Before I get into the changes that we made, I'd like to provide a little bit of context on the AHSC quantification methodology and tool. So CARB's methodologies and tools are developed for estimating the outcomes of projects that are funded by the California Climate Investments. We have a series of criteria for developing our methodologies that are listed here on this slide. As a reminder, the calculator does not assign points or weight to any quantifiable project type. It simply estimates the benefits of those project types. And CARB has worked with SGC to determine the eligible project types that meet the objectives of the AHSC program, to determine, which project type should be included in the calculator. CARB staff periodically updates the QM and calculator tools whenever new data becomes available or when there's a need to improve the tool's functionality. So this round, most of the changes that we made to the calculator were simply to improve its user interface, to align its user interface with other CARB CCI programs. And in some instances, we're also expanding quantifiable project types. Next slide, please. Okay, so on the affordable housing tab, we added an option to estimate the benefits of a second building. You'll see just a second row there for quantifying a second building. So previously, multi-building projects required an applicant to submit multiple calculators. So you'll no longer have to do that if you have 2 buildings in your project. And we also clarified in the user guide that the only reason that an applicant will have to quantify 2 or more buildings separately is if each building has a different dwelling type. So for example, if one building is an apartment building and the other one is a senior building. Next slide, please. Next, we made some significant changes to the shared mobility tab. This is the tab that allows applicants to estimate the benefits of projects like car share, van pool, bike share, scooter share. In the previous version, the AHSC calculator asked users to estimate the benefits of these project types in the clean mobility calculator and then to enter the outputs from that calculator into the AHSC calculator. But to simplify this process for applicants, we've now incorporated the calculations from the Clean Mobilities calculator into the AHSC calculator. So you can do all of the quantification directly in the AHSC calculator. The new Shared Mobility tab also includes bike and pedestrian infrastructure as project types. As such, we deleted the previous active transportation tab where bike and ped projects were previously quantified. And then finally, we updated some emission factors for calculating GHG emission reductions. Next slide, please. I just wanted to provide a quick overview of the shared mobility project types that you can quantify in the shared mobility tab. So the project types are new or expanded service and subsidies, and that would mean, new service or subsidies for car share, van pool, or micro mobility like bike share. There are specific eligible vehicle types that are available for each of these project types. And then you can also quantify, as I mentioned before, bike infrastructure and pedestrian infrastructure. Next slide, please. Okay, we also updated the user interface of the transit tab to look like the inputs tab of the low carbon transit operations program calculator. In addition to its different formatting, you will notice that the project type options are more specific. We'll talk about that in a sec, but the quantification methods that are associated with each of these project type options are the same methods used in the previous AHSC calculator. We did also add a couple of new capabilities to this tab. So next slide, please. One is that applicants that are proposing a new or expanded service by replacing a vehicle can now estimate the emission reductions of fuel conversion if a baseline vehicle is replaced by a zero emission vehicle. The other is that you can quantify the reductions associated with renewable energy generated to operate a new service vehicle as a result of the proposed project. And finally, the updated emission factors also impact the emission reductions from transit projects. Next slide, please. So these are the new project types that you will see in the transit tab of the calculator. In the previous version of the AHSC calculator, the user chose a specific vehicle type or capital improvement to be able to quantify their project. But now there is an extra step where you will choose a more descriptive option for the transit project that you want to implement. These should be broad enough to capture the usual transit projects that are proposed to the AHSC program, but please do let us know if the project that you have in mind that you're planning to propose for round 9 does not fall into these categories. We can work with you to figure out what is the best category to choose. Next slide, please. So that concludes the changes that we're making and we're proposing for round 9. The calculator will be available on CARB's website tomorrow afternoon, and we will be accepting comments on the calculator and user guide and QM until December 20th. If you have comments or questions, please direct those questions to the GGRF program email on this slide. And I think that we'll also post the link to the CARB webpage and email in the chat. Next slide. Okay. Yes, please be in touch if you have any questions or comments. Thanks. I will pass it to Jessica now.
Thank you, Julia. Yes, okay, so now I'll cover next steps and timelines. If you can go to the next slide, please. So just a couple of next steps if you're considering applying to AHSC for round 9. Our SGC AHSC website's a great place to start. It has our past and current guidelines, fact sheets, and past workshop recordings. AHSC also, it provides technical assistance to applicants. So there is an intake form on our website that you can get started with that. And then, like I mentioned at the top, we do have 2 upcoming workshops and office hours. So tomorrow morning, we have a tribal-specific office hour. This time is intended for interested parties from and servicing tribal communities. So please be mindful of this when registering. And then next Monday, we will be in San Bernardino for our SoCal workshop. And on Tuesday morning, we'll be in Stockton for our NorCal workshop. These workshops, like I said, will cover the same presentation materials. So no need to attend, but welcome you all to join us in person. And then lastly, next Wednesday, we also have what we call general office hours. So this is open to all interested parties. So join if you'd like to discuss draft round 9 guidelines with staff. It'll be an open space for that. So next slide. So again, before I go into Q&A, this is the general timeline for round 9 with final guidelines set for February of next year, and then the NOFA in March of next year. And then next slide. So before we go into open discussion, a couple of highlights. So feel free to continue using the Q&A function at the bottom to post questions. We'll be answering directly in the chat or live. We'll also, if you also have any verbal questions you'd like to ask, we'll be asking everyone to use the raise hand function. And then we'll go ahead and ask you to unmute, and so you can ask your question. And then lastly, we are asking if you have any comments you'd like to provide, perhaps it's not a question, if you could submit that using the Q&A function, just saying comment and then inserting your comment. We'll be logging those comments at the end of our webinar. On our end, it's helpful to just have a record of that written out. So with that, thank you all for your time and attention during our presentation. I'm now going to hand it off to Brianne to facilitate our Q&A period.
Great, thanks, Jessica. So like Jessica said, feel free to write any questions or comments in the chat. I am here. If there are any verbal comments, feel free to use the raise hand function and I'll be able to bring you up. Jessica, I actually think you'll need to make me host. Perfect. All right. First, Zenat, I'm going to allow you to speak. Or allow you to unmute and mute yourself. And so you should have the floor now.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thanks. I had a couple questions about some of the changes that impact disability access. The big one is the changes to section, or the new addition of section 110, the state and federal laws. So my reading is that this includes a lot of the language that was in the prior round, but some of it's been changed a bit. And I'm curious if the MHP requirements on the minimum percentages of accessible units that need to be in housing developments, the way I'm reading these draft guidelines, those minimum percentages would no longer be required, whereas they were in round 8. And I'm wondering if you could share whether that was an intentional, like substantive change to this round, or if that's maybe like a drafting ambiguity that needs to get clarified.
Yeah, great question. I actually think HCD would be best to answer this question because a lot of those kind of like legal frameworks come from their end. Is there anyone at HCD that wouldn't mind unmuting themselves and answering this question?
Hi, this is Craig Shields from HCD. I think we need to look into that a little bit. I don't have an answer at the moment.
Yeah, at the most high level, we modeled most of the section 110 in alignment with MHP. So we reference, section 7314 from MHP. But definitely dig into that. And if you don't mind writing that as like a comment so that we make sure that we're following up with it on our end.
Sure, yeah, I can do that. Is it okay if I ask another question?
Yeah, of course.
For sure.
Okay. And then in the scoring section, I see in the memo that one of the changes that was made to this round is at-grade boarding infrastructure is no longer eligible for points. We were a little surprised to see that because at-grade boarding is a pretty big unmet transportation need for people with disabilities. Could you explain like what the reasoning was for not making that eligible for points anymore?
Yeah, the reason for that one, or at least our intention, is that we had the definition we were using was not necessarily formalized or set in stone in any way. And so the projects we were getting that were saying they were using at-grade boarding were not what we intended at-grade boarding to be. So if you have a definition for at-grade boarding that we could include, that would be something great we would love. We just can't find a good resource that gives us a definition that would have the projects create the at-grade boarding that I'm sure you're looking for and what we're looking for.
Okay. And when you say at-grade boarding, you're thinking of this as the same as level boarding, or are you thinking of it as something different?
I believe we're thinking about it as level boarding, but I feel like that's maybe part of the problem. It's like the definitions aren't super uniform.
Yeah.
And we're not like the ways we've conveyed it in the past are just not being met by the applicants, if that makes sense. Like I think the definition is being mixed up and lost in translation a little bit.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Do you mind if I ask my last one more question?
Please, yeah.
Okay. And then I see in these guidelines, there's a definition of rent that pulls some language from TCAC, and then for purposes of vouchers, rent only includes the tenant portion and not the subsidy. And I think that definition makes sense in some ways, but the way that the word is used in the rest of the guidelines, I'm not sure I understand the reasoning, because like when you're looking at pieces like, you know, an applicant having to demonstrate financial feasibility, it seems like you'd want to allow them to include all of the rent they're getting, you know, the subsidy plus the tenant portion, not just the tenant portion. But maybe I'm missing something there. Could you explain like what the reasoning was for defining rent that way for subsidy holders?
Yeah, I know most of our definition was to align with MHP for this round. I'll again pivot to HCD if they want to take on kind of where that definition comes from and how it's portrayed throughout the guidelines.
That's correct. We did pull that over from MHP, but I will look through and consider the inconsistencies that you mentioned. If you want to shoot us an email or send us a message, if you have any more specific information, that would be helpful to make sure that we get those all corrected.
Sure, I can do that. What email should I send that to?
AHSC@sgc.ca.gov.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Perfect. All right. Thanks so much. And our next hand is from Alicia Klein. I will allow you to speak button, which just seems, I'll allow you to unmute and mute, and you can ask your question.
Okay, thank you. This is sort of a political question, possibly. With the change in the administration and Congress coming up, I'm curious if the agencies here have assessed any risks or even maybe opportunities to the cap and trade program more generally, either for round 9 or for AHSC beyond round 9.
I can take on this one on. Yeah, so thankfully, I think for AHSC, we're continuously funded through 2030. I know there's conversations about how we can, you know, ensure the cap and trade program beyond 2030. But in terms of the short-term impacts of the change in administration, we feel confident that we will be continuing on having, you know, we're continuously funded and appropriated, and we'll be releasing our notices of funding availability. I don't know if that answered your question specifically, if you wanted me to.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks. All right. Excuse me. Next, we have Dara. I will allow you to mute and unmute.
Hello, just to following up on what Zena was asking, the that paragraph on accessibility that is in the MHP guidelines that got modified, we will send an email on that, but it includes a lot of legal requirements that were worked out over a long period of time, and we really need to understand why it's being modified. It doesn't make sense to us. So thank you for looking into that. We think it's a very important paragraph in the MHP guidelines. So thank you.
Yeah, and I will say we are coordinating with our partners at on HCD then that's leading the multifamily supernova and MHP guideline updates. I know they released their draft guidelines in October. So coordinating with them on also their feedback that they've received, because a lot of our changes were made kind of together.
Yeah, thanks, because I don't think these changes were in the MHP guideline changes, so thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, next we have Sue. I will allow you to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wasn't sure. I have and will have a few more homeownership project related questions.
Okay.
In terms of threshold, we have a potential project that has a developer that's a for-profit developer. They've never developed affordable housing in terms of homeownership. They're a homeownership developer. And as you may or may not know, there are not many homeownership developers that work exclusively in affordable housing. So this developer is game to get into AHSC, even though most developers, no offense, don't want anything to do with state-funded programs. So the question is, given that they don't have any affordable housing development experience per se in home ownership, affordable home ownership development, if they are working as a co-applicant with a city that runs a first-time homebuyer program, and the only part of affordable homeownership that really is important to the development process is the back end, which is the selling to a qualified first-time homebuyer, and then the resale restrictions on down the line. If that combination of the city and the developer, could they meet threshold in terms of experience?
Yeah, I will also pass this question off to HCD with on the experience threshold, namely maybe Hector. Yeah, Hector's got this one. Thank you.
Hey there, thank you. Hi, Sue. So yeah, we have a few parts to this question that you're asking about. So just in general, experience is going to be a requirement of any applicant that submits to AHSC, or whether it's for the rental portion or for homeownership. And there are experience requirements. So in the example that you provided, the jurisdiction is the primary applicant. They have to demonstrate that they've administered a home ownership program within the past 10 years.
Yes.
We HCD and SGC rely on that jurisdiction locality to administer that program. So they would identify the developer, whether that's a for-profit or nonprofit, to dole those funds out to. So we're going to give the grant to the jurisdiction. The jurisdiction then decides who that's going to go to. As far as a new developer coming in for home ownership, if they don't have experience developing affordable housing, whether that's rental or home ownership projects previously, they wouldn't be eligible just across the board.
But there's nothing, this is why I'm asking, there's nothing special about affordable home ownership from the development side. There's no operations, there's no reserves, there's no nothing. It's just you're developing housing and then passing it off to, some of the developers, both Habitats and Heritage Housing Partners, I think they're the only ones, that do work with the initial sale of the unit. But then the resale, again, gets passed on to the local jurisdiction. And so this is a developer that's developed hundreds of homes at a time. And so they know how to develop. They know how to develop well, quickly, and inexpensively compared to a lot of affordable housing development. And so it seems the fact that there's nothing about what they do that involves affordability. Why couldn't they be eligible?
Yeah, and again, high level, because I don't know who the developers we're talking about, and we really don't usually go into project specific.
I'll use the example of, no, I didn't mean to interrupt, KB Homes. I mean, should they ever knock on your door and say, hey, we want to play in AHSC and develop some 80%, first-time homebuyer units? Would you turn them away simply because they've never done it before?
I'm just going to go over what the requirements are, and then
I know,
once we have, no, that's okay. good conversation because I know homeownership is one of the priorities probably going forward. So we're going to look for avenues on how to complete these types of and award these types of projects, but just really high level, right? There's a covenant that's going to be recorded against these units, whether it's a single family or some sort of multifamily / homeownership kind of development. We're looking at avenues in order to fund these types of projects. There are affordability restrictions on them. And with that, we would look for an experienced developer to be able to fulfill the requirements of that affordability restriction, right? It's not just regular market rate units and so forth. And if there's populations involved, you're also going to have to be responsible for providing those services. So that's usually why, for at least as far as the CalHome or CERNA single family models go, they deal directly with the jurisdictions because the jurisdictions are more available to meet the needs of the developers that are going to be actually doing and building these developments.
So then I'm confused because in CalHome, a jurisdiction can go get an award of, say, for down payment assistance, and then they can go out and go to a private developer and provide that down payment assistance to the private developer who has developed the housing, and then they put the covenant on the property and move forward. And that's it for the developer. The developer's done. And having had recent experience with, I think, the first covenant that HCD did for an ASIC project, that left the city it left the locality in that long-term position. So again, trying to, I mean, if we're going to get affordable homeownership, the capacity is out there in the world where they don't do affordable homeownership. They just build the houses. And, those are the companies that can build, huge numbers at a time. And so I'm just trying to see how we can bring them into the fold. So maybe this is a separate discussion. Just so you know, I've posed this question to Alicia Center, and I told her that I'd be bringing it up today. And so I think she was going to go talk to Craig. And so again, I don't want to take up a whole bunch of time on this, but it would be really nice to get some more capacity in terms of homeownership development. And
yeah, and I see Craig popped on, but I just want to finish this off. I think you and I are actually saying the same thing. The jurisdiction would be the one that identifies the eligible developer, administers that program, and so forth. So I think we're talking about the same thing, but a good conversation to have as homeownership, again, is a focus going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Sue. It's Craig. I just want to say thanks for mentioning this. As you know, we collectively have been struggling to make homeownership applications successful and competitive, and we appreciate the work you've done, especially helping us. So I would say, just as we're kind of sort of hypothetically evaluating an applicant's experience, it's not just one or two things, right? It's not just the number of units. It's the whole suite of components of the project. And if we have an applicant, KB Homes, for example, who absolutely they can build housing, right? If their deficiency, as we might call it in our application review, is that they haven't demonstrated that they know how to develop big A affordable housing, we would have a conversation with them, right? Or whatever applicant, and find out how they're going to clear that hurdle. So it's a bit of a conversation.
Yeah, and quite frankly, and that's why I don't want to take up too much more time with this is for round 10. I'm starting early because I know that this is going to be new. This is a substantial developer, and they are very hesitant to get involved with subsidy and all of this. The city that is, which is very, has the experience with first-time buyer programs. They are there to hold their hand, but the developer's still nervous. And so maybe we should have some calls with them so that they can ask their questions, because this is a new world for them. They, as you know, most home builders they just don't want anything to do with government-run programs, and because they can take up a lot of time. And so so we'll continue this conversation on down the road. In the meantime, I do have one other question that I don't know if it's for you, Craig, or somebody else, but I'm just a little nervous that if you look at section 107, if you remember back after round 6, we went through a lot of work. There was another HCD staff person who I worked with, and we came up with a kind of a comparable thing for homeownership that looked at the per unit funding based on, and if you look at page 30 of the round 9 guidelines, it's there for rental. Where it's calculated based on the unit's level of income restriction, number of bedrooms per unit in the county in which the AHD is located. And we did that for home ownership. There was a kind of a comparable table that was created to match, because home ownership goes up to 120% AMI. So that's not there on the next page of 31, or next page of the next page 31. It doesn't say that anymore, that the per unit loan limit will be based on unit size and the income restriction in the county. Can we please get that back in there that involves being consistent with AB 1095. And we do not want to go back to the days back when homeownership just got a flat fee, so to speak.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we'll take a look at that for sure.
Okay. Oh, it'll be in my markup too.
Good.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue.
Thanks. That was a great discussion. All right, we do have some other hands up. So we will next go to Amanda. Amanda, I'm going to give you permission to unmute yourself.
Okay, great. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. This is very helpful. Thanks for the presentation. I wanted to pick up on a question that I think Mimi asked in the chat about transit operations. As I think you all know, transit agencies across California and the country are facing these devastating budget shortfalls. And so that may be the nature of her question, certainly the nature of mine is, are these funds able to be used for operations of transit in addition to capital? And so you answered yes, if it supports new, restored, or expanded routes. Just wondering if you can give us some further clarity on what you mean by that, particularly expanded, is there a definition of that? And any other way that we might seek to plug these budget shortfalls with transit operations funding through this program.
Yeah, I mean, the definition of expanded is essentially increasing the length or frequency of the route. And that's expanded service for the folks of the project area and of the AHD. We, in terms of that, like we do allow operations and capital as an expense for AHSC in those terms.
So just to clarify, like, would expanding service mean adding an additional run of a particular route? Does it have to be expanded by 50% or a certain meaningful percentage? Can you just clarify?
There's no set percentage. Essentially, the transit agency kind of explains how there are, expanding service, meaning that might reduce headways, it might, increase the line. It's essentially showing a ridership increase, because the intent of the program overall is to kind of help reduce vehicle miles traveled.
Yes.
So the operations associated with that would be an eligible cost.
Okay, that's great. And then it looked like you put in the chat that you're accepting comments on the calculator piece by December 20th. If there are any other comments on the guidelines more broadly, can you remind us when those are due?
Yeah, comments on the guidelines broadly are by December 11th.
Oh, next week.
Yeah, we released the draft guidelines on November 8th. We're kind of posting these. Also, if you have any additional comments, we also have like a more open office hours for dialogue in case you don't want to type it all up. You can attend next Wednesday as well.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, thank you so much. That's very helpful.
Of course, thanks. All right, next we have Michael. I'm going to give you permission to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, terrific. Thank you for the presentation. And also, I'm gratified by a number of the changes in the guidelines that are seeking to address homeownership AHDs, which is good. I know it's been a struggle over the years to make that happen. I have a very specific question in terms of the eligible costs for AHDs. And this would be in section, section 104. It breaks out, and maybe this is giving with one hand in terms of the other areas where it's making it easier for homeownership. But I think it's taking that away when it has a category of costs for homeownership AHDs. It lists costs which basically should be the same as costs for multifamily rental, with one pretty critical exception. It provides for payoff of bridge loan financings for site acquisition, which has a term of 36 months or less. And I'm curious why that's in there, given that, as we all know, with these affordable projects, it can take years and years to line up subsidies to complete the capital stack, and it's not uncommon to have acquisition or bridge financing that exceeds 36 months. So I'm just curious why that's in there, and if there's no statutory reason, I think it really should be removed. If someone could speak to that.
Yeah, I think that may also be an HCD question. Hector, Craig, are you able to tackle this one?
So I do see that in there. If we can do this as a takeaway, because I don't know if this is what's in Cal Home, and that's why it was brought over to this. So I just need to better understand what the 36-month time frame is and how that relates, if that's okay.
Okay, that would be helpful to get clarity on that. My second question.
I'm sorry, I have a clarifying. Michael, I'm sorry, were you suggesting that the 36-month term should be longer, or that entire?
Well, that should, I mean, the eligible costs include land acquisition, the cost of buying the land. Whether that's financed with cash equity or debt, it really should be indifferent, I would think. If that, it's sort of inconsistent with land acquisition is, of course, an eligible cost. And so if the land acquisition is financed with the bridge loan, which is very common, whether it's any one of the providers or a municipality that provides bridge financing or whatever, it just seemed like an odd thing to include just specifically for home ownership.
I see. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. And then my other question kind of follows on the policy question that one of the participants asked earlier. Governor Newsom has proposed or raised as a possibility that if the Trump administration eliminates the $7,500 tax credit for EVs, that the state of California would do that and use cap and trade money to fund that. Is there any sense in the room what that would mean for the AHSC program, or would the AHSC program certainly in round 9, would it still be at the 775 million level? Any thoughts on that?
So I'll just say the 20% allocation for AHSC is in the statute, and every year there are various organizations and entities trying to claw away at that money. So that's nothing new, but we do feel it's fairly protected.
Okay, terrific. That's good to hear. That was it for me. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Michael. All right. I do not see any other hands right now, but we are around. So feel free to continue asking questions by raising your hand or in the Q&A box, and we will be able to answer them.
oh, sorry. Go ahead and answer Robin's question online, live of, are there any new requirements for on-demand transit service such as Calvans besides the requirement for a designated pickup location in the project area? Are there any requirements for on-site parking, charging, or funding vehicle caps? So to start out, van pool is kind of going to be categorized under, shared mobility, most likely under car share. The shared mobility aspect of the calculator does ask for, like the average number of passengers. That's not a new requirement. It's just what it's been like in the past. In terms of the requirements for on-site parking and charging, we'll just be asking for more details of what is currently provided for van pools within your transit input documentation that's provided. So when that comes out of what type of upload materials that we'd like, that would be provided in that upload. So make a short answer, there's no specific new requirements that we're asking. We're just going to asking more clarity on what is provided in association with that van pool. Then there's also another question from an anonymous attendee, Craig, Hector, I'm not sure if you either can answer of, does AHSC use MHP's emerging developer definition as an eligible sponsor? If you all can take that one live.
It does not.
It does not. Yeah.
Figured, just want to make sure.
It doesn't use emerging developer or community-based developer.
Then we had another question of, is there an estimation of GHG emissions reduced per spending on the program? Not sure if you mean over the program's lifetime or over a certain round, or you mean per project. For scoring purposes for GHG, there is a cost efficiency scoring association. So we do calculate, out of all the projects, how much GHG is reduced per your funding request per program lifetime. Not off the top of my head, but I will look it up and answer.
We do have a couple hands raised now, so I may switch back to those. We'll just trade back and forth. David, I am giving you permission to unmute your microphone.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Hey, I'm David Abrams with Palm Communities. I'm concerned that there's talk about including farmland of local importance. I'm looking at new sites all the time and have ASIC in mind when I'm looking at those sites. I've seen some promising ASIC sites that are listed as farmland of local importance in the California Important Farmland Finder tool. If a layperson who knew nothing about ASIC were to look at the site, I'm thinking about, they wouldn't understand if I told them that the state is concerned about the site being developed because the state thinks the site is important farmland when the site is close to major retail, abuts a freeway. I'm just suggesting that SGC stick with what is proposed right now, which are the prime farmland of statewide importance, and unique farmland. Just saying that the map doesn't always seem to correspond with what's reasonable. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, thanks for your comment. We have received comments similar about the FFMP tool, and we're working with their teams as well as other interagency partners on getting the best definition of ag land or agricultural land. And the one that this proposal to add back in local farmland of local importance and grazing land is in order to align with CEQA. But we greatly appreciate your comment. Feel free if you want to also email us your comment too, but we've got it written down here.
Sure. If a lot of affordable products are exempt from CEQA, would that kind of change their minds at all?
We can
Maybe,
certainly
possibly.
bring that to
Sure.
them. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's all. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, David. All right. Perfect. Next, Dan has a question. I am going to, where's the button? Allow you to unmute your mic. So Dan, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Were you asking? Oh, I raised my hand by mistake. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. Thanks for being here. I'll mute you back again now.
Okay.
Okay, and a question from Kate. I've allowed you to unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Hi, awesome. Thank you. It's been really interesting to hear about the farmland conversation. I just wanted to point out that, I mean, when you look at the Appendix G and the CEQA guidelines, the definition of like what is an impact to farmland, it only includes prime, unique, and farmland of statewide importance. So, I mean, it doesn't look like actually a change to grazing land would raise to a level of an environmental impact per CEQA. So I was just curious if maybe there was something else that you were hearing from the other agencies with regard to CEQA and the reason for keeping grazing land in.
Yeah, so I mean, we go off of the farmland mapping and monitoring program from the Department of Conservation, and on their website of having like, and in conversation with them of having important farmland categories, they state that for environmental review purposes under CEQA, you know, the 5 categories that are there is prime farmland, farmland of statewide importance, unique farmland, farmland of local importance, and grazing land. That's that constitutes agricultural land under their public resource code. So that's why we were basing it off that, since, you know, historically over the rounds for AHSC, we've referred to the farmland mapping and monitoring tool.
Got it. Thank you both. It's kind of reading currently as this would be more restrictive than CEQA, just based on my understanding of CEQA, but yeah, happy to look further into
Yeah,
it.
if you could refer us to that specific section, happy to also take a deeper dive into that and ask them more specifically of why, if there is a difference.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. All right, and we have next Alicia. I'm gonna give you permission to unmute yourself.
Hi, thought of another question.
Yeah.
We are working with a jurisdiction that has a site near high quality transit. It is not in a disadvantaged community. It's across the street from a disadvantaged community. Like literally, like, oh, there it is. You just cross the street and there it is. And so the jurisdiction is kind of frustrated that it's kind of, how can we work with the program to either, I don't know, have the DAC definition reconsidered, or maybe have AHSC count a project area that includes a DAC, as opposed to literally the affordable housing development pinpoint being, you know, where it is located vis-a-vis the DAC. So we're just wondering if you have, well, right, you know, what's maybe a more fruitful direction to advocate for is to have sites that are like, but you know, the line could have been drawn like 50 feet in another direction, and then it would have been, you know, gotten those extra.
Right, yeah, so sort of baseline, the 50% DAC requirement where we have to award 50% to disadvantaged communities is in statute. So that's one thing that we cannot change. And in their definition, it's based on the Cal EnviroScreen tool. And so that is the tool that we have to use to identify whether an area is a disadvantaged community or not. We use the AHD in the last few rounds just as kind of the clearest point in order for us to show that 50% of funds are going to DAC. You, in a comment letter, could make a point to assert that there are other ways that we could show that area is receiving funding that is DAC. We'd be open to that. But that is sort of where that that definition comes from. And the CalEnviro screen tool, I mean, surely you could, I guess you could ask them to update the tool if it's changed or increase others. But that's not something that we control. I'll also add that because that is you're not the first project that is sort of in a close area to a DAC. We are sort of incentivizing for the first time this round points for projects that are either in a DAC or in a low income community or a half-mile buffer community. So in this case, for this project that you explained, you may not be getting you may not be put in the 50% DAC and get kind of the DAC designation, but you would get 2 points for being in a half-mile buffer community, assuming
Yeah,
you're
I
directly across
tried
the street.
looking at that interface. I tested it out this morning, and it looks like we're across the street from that also. Honestly, I think I found it a little difficult to use. There was not a definition on the map of what the half-mile buffer was. So I was like, I don't know how to interpret that tool.
So 2 things. So the half-mile buffer, we kind of define in our guidelines for ease. In terms of referring, it's essentially communities that are a half-mile from a low-income community or disadvantaged community. In terms of your specific question of what way to advocate or what is more movable, like Rhea mentioned, the DAC definition, we refer through CCI programs, climate programs, the same definition. If you have a suggestion or comment on how to better capture your projects that are right on the buffer of certain regions, or certain zones, and how points could be designated, certainly welcome that. I will say part of the idea is that most of 50% of an AHSC request is through the housing, and the housing is set into a certain community, right? But obviously that's sometimes not reflective of what the local context is. So happy to hear any suggestions or ideas on that portion.
Okay, thank you so much.
Of course. All right. We will move on to Norma. Norma, I'm giving you the ability to unmute your mic. Oh, did Norma drop off? Okay. I think Norma dropped. Jessica, were there any other questions in the Q&A that you wanted to answer live, or were those all taken care of?
Yeah, let me answer Emily's live. I think generally we're aligning with Cal Home just to make sure that the requirements and eligible costs are aligned. Just talking with them to make sure that, for example, when we're adding first-time home buyer mortgage assistance programs, making sure that the terms are clear and that the eligible applicants are still the same throughout both programs. And then Dan's question of the GHG estimations over the lifetime of the program, that leaves around 5.7 million MTC O2E over the lifetime of the program.
Oh, and we do have Norma back. Norma, I'm going to give you the ability to unmute your mic.
Thank you, and I apologize for earlier. I've been having issues with my reception.
No worries.
Okay, my question, I like I said, I was having issues with my reception. So just to be clear, these are solely for new projects, this funding, because my inquiry is that I'm trying to rehabilitate a 30-year-old mobile home park, and low income to be exact, and just trying to find funding to try to, like I said, rehabilitate it and maybe even bring in more housing in there. Is just been a challenge for the last 2 or 3 years that I've been working on this project.
We do fund acquisition and substantial rehabilitation. You would still need to meet the net density requirements that we have. Actually, Craig, correct me if I'm wrong, does it have to be on a permanent foundation? I'm not 100%.
I think we might at HCD, we might have other programs that are better suited. So if you shoot the email to ahsc@sgc.ca.gov, I can connect you with, I'll ask you some questions, but then hopefully connect you with some funding sources.
Thank you. I'd highly appreciate that because I've been looking at all the website. I've emailed, I mean, I'm on the, that's how I got this Zoom information because I'm on the list to receive emails. So I appreciate that. Awesome.
Absolutely.
Can you put that, is that something you can put on the chat that I can?
Let me go ahead and put that in there.
Oh,
Actually,
I think I have to. I will do that, Norma.
Very well. Thank you so much. Awesome.
I'll answer the next question live. When will the webinar be posted? As soon as we're able to ADA the video and get our web team to post it. So hopefully, shooting for, I don't know what's reasonable, like next week, the week after. We'll be in-person workshops for Monday, Tuesday, so that will slow us down a little bit, but hopefully sooner rather than later. That's our intent.
I think next week is reasonable. I think we can do it. All right. I don't see any other hands, but we can hang out for just a few moments to see if there are any questions. You can always still write them in the Q&A too. We can hang out for like another, I don't know. Oh, perfect. Another question. All right. Jose, I am going to give you permission to unmute your mic.
Hi, thank you. I have just a question. I've heard something this morning regarding the multi-phase projects about some language on the from HCD saying that if they start between 6 months timeline, they are being considered one project versus two projects. And I was wondering if anyone can speak to that, because we're right now and that came because of the calculator, you're being able to add a second project. But I'm just wondering if that's something that you guys can expand on. So if the projects are 6 months, not 6 months apart, and then the issue here is that TCAC might apply those to their guidelines, which would affect us as developers and only be able to request one set of developer fee versus two.
Yeah, I think HCD could probably answer this for you if it was a messaging you received from them. So this was in a notice from HCD.
It was from our CHBC consultant, financial consultant.
Mm.
Sorry, I'm not aware of that. So we can reach out to our partner programs, but did you receive that from for a specific program that you applied to, or something you've already been awarded in?
No, it's just for projects we're working on right now in pre-development, and we're just planning out. And we were just talking about a huge project versus a multi-phase project, and that came up that it was some language from HCD, and they're providing the exact language hopefully by the end of the day, so I can follow up. But I was wondering if you knew anything about that, because we haven't seen that before.
So that might be something that has been released in the Home Key Plus program, but I'm not sure. So I don't want to say that is, but we can definitely look and get back to you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jose. You can always email us too. I put the email in the chat now, so that we can follow up. All right. Now we have this. Oh, there's a Q&A in there. Go ahead.
You could unmute Sue.
Oh, yes. Pull you up, Sue. Okay, I've given you permission to unmute your mic. Sue.
Okay. I don't know. My raise hand wasn't working, but
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I have a question about van pools.
Yeah.
Are they still allowed? Because a van pool by its nature is not on demand. It's a flexible route, oftentimes can have a schedule. I know there were some issues with van pools in the last round that seem to be more specific to employers. But if a local transit agency wanted to start a van pool and had a flexible route, it was open to the general public, had a pickup point within the project area, as well as probably some other pickup points, would that be allowed?
Yeah, it would be allowed under car share essentially. It's a shared mobility type.
Okay.
So it's just clearing that up.
So not calling it flexible transit anymore, calling it car share.
Yeah. So some of, sorry, Julia, go ahead.
No, I interrupted you, Jessica. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, just to clarify, like making sure that the investments just have a direct and meaningful benefit to, the project area and the residents, right?
Right.
But most of the services would either fall under car share or on-demand transit service, which I'm sure Julia will expand on.
Yeah, so the calculator actually doesn't specify whether something is on demand or flexible transit. What we specify is if a transit service is fixed transit, then you would quantify it on one specific tab. And if it is shared mobility, you would quantify it in a separate tab. So, if it's fixed transit and it has a fixed schedule, you would want to use a transit tab. If it's something where somebody can, there is no set schedule for where the van will go, and you can just call up some type of service to come pick you up and take you to, a location that you specify, that would be considered more of a project type under shared mobility.
Okay. So what if this had a schedule for pickup times, but then people who were picked up could say, I need to, they don't all necessarily every time need to go to the same place. It's where people need to go, but they don't have access to a car or they don't want to drive. So that's kind of a hybrid. Where would you put it?
It has a schedule, but
You can go get this shuttle or this van at certain pickup points at 12, 12:33, whatever. But it is more flexible in terms of where the riders need to go.
Sure, we would have a preference for you to quantify that under shared mobility.
Okay, so that's still shared mobility. Okay. And then actually, since you're there, I have another GHG question. You were talking before, so say you, because this might come up in another project. So if you had I'll be a diesel train and you replace it with a hydrogen train. So you were saying something about if you're going from GHG emissions to none. So you can calculate that? That does count?
Yeah, as long as right now as it stands, as long as you expect that there will be an expansion of service and therefore ridership increase associated with the improvement, yes. If you cannot fund just that fuel replacement or that vehicle replacement by itself.
Okay, so you have to actually, well, again, the hydrogen trains can go faster than diesel trains, so.
Exactly. So if you're going to have some ridership increase because of that, then yes, you will be able to quantify that. The fuel conversion is not really one of the goals of the program.
Okay.
That's why you wouldn't be able to quantify it by itself. But please do comment on that if folks have opinions on whether or not that should be able to be quantified by itself.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. All right, I don't see any other hands up at the moment. Looks like our Q&A box is also cleared of questions. We do have this meeting running until 3, but we can always leave early if everyone has gotten all their questions answered. So we can just wait around. We can wait for another couple minutes, see if anyone has a last minute questions, and then we'll let you go. At the very least, thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate it, and all the feedback is really welcomed.
Hope to see some of you in person next Monday and Tuesday, and if not, perhaps general office hours. Well, thank you all again.
All right, looking like people are just dropping off, so I think we're probably good to close this out officially. Thank you so much, everyone. Again, the email is in the chat. If you want to email us with any other questions. Otherwise, hopefully we'll talk to you in other spaces. Thank you.